Lucky for you, today's video is only 13 minutes long because I could talk about Vietjet for hours. Hi there, my name is Kevin and I make honest, unsponsored, and to the point narrated video tours about flights and hotels all over the world. This is episode number 105, and today we're flying from Denpasar, Bali to Saigon, Vietnam on board a Vietjet A321. Hope you'll join me for the ride. Welcome to Denpasar, Bali, more specifically Brunei International Airport, where our journey today begins. If you'd like to know the exact reasonable fare that I paid for this flight, as well as my next 5 videos in queue, please check out the description below. Few tourist hotspots on Earth had it as bad as Bali did during COVID, and that's in large part due to the airport being entirely closed throughout almost all of 2021. Let's not forget Bali's an island, only reopening to a handful of domestic flights in October of last year and international ones this past April. This contrasts to other tourist hotspots throughout the region, which at the very least kept a healthy flow of domestic tourists passing through during the entirety of COVID. Phuket and Phu Quoc are two that come to mind. Speaking of Phuket and Phu Quoc, I have almost 40 beach resort reviews from around this region alone on the channel already, and if you enjoy this video, I'd invite you to give it a big thumbs up and then subscribe so that you can dig around and see what's on offer. And let's not forget, 3 new videos coming out each week. Please also check out my new Patreon in the description below. A big thanks in advance for all that you do. Alright, back to the beautiful and quirky airport. Online check-in was available 24 hours before departure, but since Vietjet, and well, Vietnam in general, have not entered the digital boarding pass age yet, that check-in process really didn't mean much, especially if you already selected your seat. So a 20-minute wait in line was in order. While things are certainly on the up and up in Bali now, it doesn't take a discerning eye to see the effects that the closure had on the airport. There are far more shops closed than open, and it simply feels like the entire airport is under renovation, which hopefully will be worth it in the end. Denpasar's International Hall forces all passengers to walk through a literal retail maze before reaching the gate areas. Partway through the maze are the lounges on offer, which are not accepting priority pass at the moment, so I was out of luck, or so I thought. If memory serves me right, the lounges here are nothing special, with no view, and they're just warm and stuffy sitting above the rest of the passenger hall. With no lounge to enter, I did a lot of airplane spotting, which is easy to do with the massive boxy gate halls throughout the airport. As we check out all the views, let me give you a bit of background on Vietjet and why I do love them despite their many shortcomings. Vietjet was the first privately owned airline in Vietnam's history, establishing itself in 2007. After a failed attempt by AirAsia to buy a stake in the airline in 2010, Vietjet finally began operating in 2011 as the second privately owned airline, after now defunct Air Mekong, to offer domestic commercial flights in Vietnam. In 2012, to celebrate their first flight to Nha Trang, they celebrated with a quasi-bikini fashion show on board and were fined for the government for doing so. Ever since then, they've been known as the Bikini Airline to some extent. In 2013, they began their first international route between Saigon and Bangkok and have seen explosive growth since, doing whatever was necessary to secure enough aircraft. Truth be told, I've probably flown Vietjet more than any other airline in the past 10 years, and I'd say a good 20% of those flights were on wet or dry leased aircraft. One highlight being an ancient Myanmar International Airlines A320. Despite their garish branding, tacky uniforms, dreadfully annoying boarding music, persistent delays, and haphazard ground operations though, I and many others do still very much appreciate and rely on them as they single-handedly made flying affordable across Vietnam. My one example, Dalat, it's a small mountain town around 200 miles north of Saigon. Because of poor roads though, it could take up to 7 hours by bus. Around 7 years ago, Vietnam Airlines was the only airline to fly the route regularly, charging over $250 for the one-way 28-minute flight. Vietjet and later Jetstar Pacific broke the monopoly and brought fares low enough to even compete with the bus ticket prices. If you think they chased market share though without making any money, you'd be wrong. Their chairwoman, Vung Tau, is well known as Vietnam's first female billionaire. Vietjet currently has 77 aircraft in operation, with a further 320, yes, 320 on order. They also just took delivery of their first 2 wide-body aircraft earlier this year. A last-minute gate change to the far side of the airport meant that I ended up being at the end of the boarding queue. Let's take a quick look at today's flight stats while we're waiting. We would, surprise surprise, be taking off over an hour late and headed up to 35,000 feet for our 3.5-hour flight, which brought us into Saigon about 40 minutes behind schedule. As boarding begins, let me answer a question that I absolutely know will be asked. Do they check your carry-on weight? There's no straight answer to this because it varies from city to city. But generally speaking, in Vietnam, yes, they will weigh every single bag. Outside of Vietnam, I find that they usually just weigh bags that look heavier. Note that while Vietjet allows each passenger a carry-on and a personal item, their combined weight cannot exceed 7 kilograms. Stepping on board our 3-year-old Airbus A321, I was asked not to film since they were refueling, which was a new one for me. Typically speaking, all premium seats will have red headrests and the standard ones will be all black. On today's flight, I pre-reserved one of the 4 best seats on the plane for about $11 extra. There is one thing I need to point out about the exit row seats on their A321s though. All red seats come with an extra charge, rows 2 through 5 a bit less since they have standard legroom and are just the most forward seats. Today I was in seat 12 Alpha, but this graphic is to show you exactly one thing. Row 12 and 27, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, and Echo are generally chargeable as exit row seats. They, however, are not. They have completely standard legroom, and I don't know why Vietjet still charges extra for these. Do not spend extra money on them. Rows 1, 11, 26, or the window seats in rows 12 and 27 are worth it though, as the standard seat pitch is a very tight 28 inches. Here you can see the seats that I suggest avoiding, along with always appreciated individual air nozzles. My trick for staying cool on flights like this is to point all 3 air nozzles towards me as soon as I get to my seat, assuming I'm the first one there of course. If your seatmate needs it, they'll just redirect it, no harm no foul. But the majority of passengers in Vietnam won't even open their air vents, which to me is just a waste of a wonderful breeze. Our flight today would be taking off to the east, following the coastline and giving us some spectacular volcanic views, before heading due north to cross Borneo. The somewhat non-direct route kept us out of the congested Jakarta-controlled airspace. The lineup, Spool Up, and Takeoff is coming up next. Vietjet has certainly improved their food offerings over the years, now offering a menu closer to AirAsia's, which I think is the best in the region. But they're not quite at the point where I'd buy it unless I was starving. Their prices though, especially on domestic services, are very reasonable. Something that's not so reasonable though is the decoration in the bathroom. It's clean, I'll give them that, but what doesn't quite come off on camera is how reflective this neon green door is. Legit feels like stepping back into the 70s. We would continue flying north, crossing over Malaysian Borneo and Brunei, that river delta that you can see in the distance being in Malaysia while we're currently flying over Brunei. Our path would then take us to the northwest before a beautiful approach and landing in Saigon just before sunset. When flying into Saigon on Vietjet, you're all but guaranteed to park at a remote gate before being bussed to the international arrivals area, which was very quiet when we arrived. You'd think that would mean that our luggage would be quick, right? A full 55 minutes after arriving at the baggage belt, our bags finally came. Let's get into the flip-flop score and see what we're thinking. Overall, I appreciate Vietjet for the service that they provide to the country, connecting many destinations that no other airlines serve, such as today's route or the litany of other routes that they just launched to India, always for a decent price. As long as you pick your seats wisely, you'll have a comfortable trip. Just prepare yourself for a bit of a delay. Also, I love that while Vietjet does offer bundles, you can just buy each add-on a la carte, for just about the same price. Certainly, I'll be flying Vietjet again. I hope you enjoyed today's video and ask you to give it a thumbs up and subscribe so that you can catch my next video. I'll see you next time as we take a major detour to the Iberostar Selección Santa Eulalia in Ibiza.